Hey everybody, welcome back to Geezer Rider. This video is going to focus on heated clothing, also known as heated gear. I decided to do this multi-part series because when I was investigating heated gear, there wasn't a lot of information available, taking a look at everything from a holistic perspective and providing the level of detail that I as a consumer was looking for. The people were either too close to the subject matter or were reviewing a specific manufacturer's line, or even in the case where it was reviewing a specific product, there just wasn't a lot of detail. It was a real high level overview, and I don't feel it gave everybody enough information to make an educated decision and know what they were getting into. There are fringe cases where you can actually do some damage to your bike's electrical system if you haven't planned things out accordingly. We're going to help you avoid that, and we'll get right into it. So heated clothing is in several categories. So first you have base layers or liners. These are things that are worn almost like underwear, almost like a t-shirt or a vest liner or a jacket liner, or pant liners, kind of look like Under Armour pants. And the footwear is pretty much stays the same, the heated footwear, unless you find, a boot or something where the heat element is built into it. That's pretty rare. And we'll get into the heated footwear in a bit. So the other thing, so we talked about the liners briefly, then there's the garment itself. So you have a jacket or a pair of pants or a pair of gloves where the heating elements are built into those specific items. And you can buy glove liners too. They look like the Lady Isotone, or real thin, silky things, and they have heat elements in them. So the disadvantages and advantages to both. The advantages to the liners are you may have a bit more flexibility if you have weight gain or weight loss, in that the liners are designed to fit close to your body, to put those heating elements close to your body, and you can replace a jacket or a pair of pants or a pair of gloves and continue to use the liners. In the case of the glove liners, for example, I find that slippery feeling of your fingers moving around inside the glove, or your palm slightly shifting inside the glove, is a little off-putting to me. That's a personal preference. It shouldn't hold you back from testing it, and I would strongly advise you, where you can lay hands on the product, do so. Get familiar with what they look like, how they feel, what they do. There's generally some heated clothing vendors at motorcycle rallies. You can see heated gear at some dealerships. A lot of times they don't have a mannequin set up at the dealerships and such. They don't have a mannequin set up with the gear on it, or it's not plugged in, or you have to buy it, try it, and a lot of places won't take returns on electrical components. So do your research before you make a purchase. The advantages of buying the garment with the heating element already built into it, like the pants or the jacket, that everything is where it's supposed to be. Everything's rated for the insulation that is provided with the garment, and everything's going to work together. So those are two ways to go there. The other is, the big trend right now is in rechargeable battery operated heated gear. So with the lithium batteries, you're getting additional runtime. Some are just a few hours, but others are pretty much towards a full riding day set on a low temperature. And oftentimes that's all you need. You're just trying to ward off a little bit of the cold, just add some supplemental heat so your body can do its job and generate some additional heat, and not lower your core temperature or your extremities, your feet or your fingers or your arms, to the point where it's distracting for your riding because you're feeling cold, chilly, or in some cases you could get frostbite depending on what kind of conditions you're driving in. The rechargeable gear tends to be independent of each other. So if you have heated socks that with rechargeable batteries, they're going to be independent of pants or pant liners with rechargeable batteries, and as is the jacket. So you're likely to wind up with multiple ways of controlling these. Some are just high, medium, low, off. or I'm sorry, off, high, medium, low, or some of them come with like a little remote control key fob that you can change the temperature on the fly. That's probably something you would want to look for. You're not going to want to reach down at a stoplight and diddle with your electric sock switch. But do some research and make sure that that key fob is going to hold up over time. That stuff is newer. It hasn't been out in the field for 20 years like the traditional plug-in heated gear. Doesn't mean it's not good. We just have to keep our eyes open, continue to read reviews about durability, longevity, and think about this. A lot of us have bought, cordless power tools over the years, and think about if you can still find a battery for your 5 or 10-year-old cordless power drill. And you say, well, am I really going to be wearing 10-year-old heated gear? Yeah, it's unless you have immense weight gain or weight loss, this stuff should last you a lifetime of riding. And just because it's not the latest and greatest doesn't mean it's not still safe. You're going to inspect that like you would any other riding equipment every season before you start. In this case, that would generally be the fall. And look at it periodically to make sure nothing's frayed, worn, abraded, etc. But again, this stuff should last you many, many years. So thinking of that, can you still find a replacement battery for your 10-year-old cordless drill? Are you going to be able to find a replacement battery for your 10-year-old heated gear that you bought off Alibaba or Amazon or eBay or something? Make sure it's from a noted manufacturer that has support, and you can simply do that by going out to the manufacturer's website and looking and seeing if they're supplying replacement batteries for some of their older product lines, if they had rechargeable battery items. So something to keep in mind with that whole line of rechargeable gear. The more traditional way to handle it is devices that plug into what we'll call the cigarette lighter or the power port, or hardwired to a battery. So there's a couple of ring terminals and a fused cable with some kind of end on it that plugs into the heat controller of the heated gear that everything else is going to plug into. Or like I said, you can use a cigarette lighter adapter. What you need to know there, and for newer riders and for people that aren't as nuts and bolts into this stuff, you may have to rely on a trusted vendor to help you, and they're going to have to know a little bit about your bike, and they're going to have to know a lot about their equipment. So why is that important? This equipment is running a heating element. Heating elements draw a lot of power, respectively. So we've got, I'll just use heated insoles for your shoes as an example. On high setting, they can draw 2.1 amps. That's significant, especially over time, and for a smaller bike with a smaller battery and maybe smaller charging output, where the manufacturer, when they built the bike, didn't anticipate you plugging in a lot of accessories. And maybe you've already got a cell phone charger on the bike, or some LED accent lights, or some additional running lights, or something like that. All of that load is going to, and load is the burden on the battery and the charging system, all of that is going to speak to how much heated gear you can run concurrently, all at the same time, and at what power level you can run it. So when you pick all your gear, or as you're going through and picking your gear, you're going to have found out what the maximum capabilities of your motorcycle are. Chances are that you're going to be able to run everything you need to. You might just not be able to run it all at the same time, and that could be inconvenient, especially if you're newer to riding and you're not familiar with wearing this stuff. Turning things on and off, or from low to high, etc., while you're riding can be a big distraction, and we want you focused on the ride. So keep simplicity in mind as you're going through this, but also make sure you don't overtax your system. So where does this all begin? How do you start? What I would suggest is that you start with knowing where you personally get coldest on the bike that you think you're going to ride the most wearing heated gear at this time. And at this time is a very relevant consideration, because again, we're going to expect that the heated gear components, the vest, pants, etc., jacket, pants, gloves, foot liners, are going to last for a long time. You may have a couple bikes. You may have 8 bikes before you decide to retire your heated gear. So you should anticipate, maybe I'll be back on a bike without a fairing or a windshield at one point. So I'm going to want a heated jacket or a heated liner that goes down my arms completely, and not just a heated vest that's going to warm up my core. So I won't drop my core temp and get loopy riding, but man, are my arms going to get cold. The same thing with placement of the heated elements on the pants. Some you'll see in your searches, maybe heated chaps, for example, which are only going to heat the front of your thighs and the front of your calves, because that's where they think all the wind contact is going to come from. But the ambient temperature behind your leg is going to drop because there's no heat there, and it's still exposed to the elements, because the chaps only run 180 degrees. They wrap around your leg this way, whereas a pant line or a pant will go completely around your leg. So you want to look at the manufacturer's diagram where they place the heating elements in the garment. So I'm going to talk about wired heating gear. So this is something that is going to plug into your vehicle's battery, or charging system somehow. And the reason for that is that's the reviews I'm going to be doing, is going to be gear that plugs into the system. If you want to review, look at the rechargeable gear again, do so. But most of it is still relatively new, and I mean, like, maybe the oldest real viable stuff has maybe been around 5 years, which sounds like quite a while compared to other electronics, but you're talking about something that you're expecting to last quite a while. So what we'll start with is, and this is all going to be an audible presentation, so you're just going to have to visualize with me, because I don't want you mired down in the details of a particular garment that I might have to show you when we're trying to talk about things at a real high level for right now. So it's all going to start with, we mentioned it before, talking about the vest protecting your core. And that's basically just keeping your internal organs up to temperature, because what happens is, as the temperature of those drop, your abdominal cavity, to your upper chest, your body says, hey, this stuff's getting cold, this stuff's important, I'm going to restrict blood flow, aka heat distribution, to the extremities, which is your feet and your hands and your arms and your legs. So the theory is, if you keep your core up, then that's enough and you'll be okay. In areas where it doesn't get that cold, maybe the coldest it drops for you is 60 degrees, 50 degrees, something like that. You might be able to get by, depending on what your preference is and your tolerance for cold, especially over time. Riding for an hour in 40 degree temperatures, this is all Fahrenheit, by the way, is a lot different than riding at 40 degrees Fahrenheit for an 8-hour day. You also want to anticipate that you're going to be getting on and off the bike a couple of times. Chances are, if you're wearing heated gear, it's because you are going on a longer ride, and you're going to have to dismount to take a meal break or a bathroom break, or to get fuel. And how cumbersome is all the wiring that you have to attach or detach in order to get off the bike and put everything back together and get going. And how is all that going to route so that it isn't a safety problem, and it doesn't whip around in the wind or clack against something and distract you from your riding. But anyway, back to the protecting your upper body. So I really don't see the benefit of just having a heated vest. I think if you need heated clothing for your upper body, you really need to have it cover your arms and everything, and there are other advantages to that as well. The heated liner, we talked about liners a little bit ago. I am not so hung up on fashion or anything like that. I don't mind wearing something that is several years old, maybe looks just a little tatty, but is still safe and still offers protection. So what I am going to focus on is the overall garment where the heat elements are built into it. So we're going to talk about a heated jacket, which I think is the way to go, but you should make your own decision. Why do I think a heated jacket is the way to go? Well, for one, if you shop, and this is something to be aware of, there are multiple connections inside the heated jacket. One is for power to come in and then to be distributed from the heated jacket. There should be additional wires that go down, and they're integrated into the sleeve so they're unobtrusive and you don't feel them when you're flexing or riding. And then there's a tether that comes out the wrist area that you can plug your heated gloves into. And if the heated jacket is made well, that feed coming back from both glove terminates somewhere in the midsection of the jacket, such that you can run that off a separate heat controller. Heat controller, temperature thermostat, rheostat, is referred to in the industry as a heat troller. So they took the word controller, made it troller. Marketing, who knows? But anyway, you may wind up with several heat trollers to control several zones on your body. Chances are one setting is not going to be good enough for your entire body. You're going to at least want to split it into 2 zones. So this jacket, whatever it is you select, and you're doing your research, you're checking the reviews, you're looking at the online diagrams, and there's people out there doing video reviews, and we're going to do one of a jacket. But what I would be looking for if I were you is a jacket that is able to feed the heated gloves, is able to split off that feedback from the heated gloves in their independent connections, so you can put on a individual heat controller, and then another input for the heating elements in the jacket, which should heat up your wrist. A lot of them will have a heating zone around your neck. And if you've ever ridden in the cold long enough, for whatever reason, unless you have real long hair or you're wearing a neck warmer of some kind, the back of your neck gets cold. Sometimes even if you are wearing a neck warmer, which is like a, infinity band around, just almost like a hair band, but goes around your neck. And they make them short, and they make them tall, and they make them out of thick fuzzy material and thin silky material. But anyway, so you might want to investigate whether you think you want the neck band in the jacket to be heated. Arms, and think about it. Is it just the top of the arm where they're thinking you're going to get wind, or is it under here? Generally, your armpits don't need a whole lot of heat, and you're likely to sweat there. So the element should stop on either side. You're going to have heating elements that come up the front of you and cover most of your torso. And there are a number of jackets that don't have a heating element on the back. I'm not sure of the wisdom of this, what the thought is, that you've already broken the wind and that there's heat inside the jacket, but I think you're going to want an element on the back as well. That is a lot to power. And what you don't want to do is be in a rush for everything to get hot, because you're going to have to put it on a high setting to feel something. The jacket's insulated, it's designed to still keep you warm when you get off the bike, and it should be able to do that because you don't have all that cold air moving over you. So it's got to work with the insulation and everything in order to heat you up. That's going to take a little time. You're probably not going to put on all this heated gear for a 20-minute ride. It'll just about get warmed up. Think about your car. You turn it on and it takes a few minutes to get the heat. So this is no different. And you're also going to want to back down off a high or medium setting if you can to a low setting to use the least amount of power possible, least draw on your system. So think about how that jacket is constructed. Think about if you need waterproofing and how they achieve that. Do they give you an additional liner to put inside that, the exterior of the jacket's still going to soak through, but then they've got you in this hefty bag to try and keep the water off your body proper? Or is the exterior waterproof, or at least water resistant? Chances are, if the weather's cold, that you might get caught in some kind of little downpour or something. You're probably not going to ride if it's icy out or the road's completely covered in snow. But you want to make sure that you're not having cold water infiltrate the gear. So the seams should be covered, the zippers should be covered with a flap. Sometimes they Velcro close over the zipper or snap, things of that nature. So that's a rough overview of what I think you should be looking for in a heated jacket. The built-in armor or CE gear is basically some foam padding in the elbows and maybe in the back, etc. That is another reason why somebody might want to use the heated liners, so that they can use their highly armored gear, or maybe they have a leather racing outfit or something they want underneath. But you can get much more common now, becoming even more common, you can get these garments with a little bit of armor built into them. And you know, we were talking about snow, we were talking about ice, and we were talking about water a little while ago. So the likelihood of something going afoul is a little bit higher during the off season when it's colder out. And also there's less of us on the road when it's 30 degrees outside. So drivers aren't really thinking about a bike so much, and the car's all closed up. Hardly anybody's got their windows open. They're inside with their gizmos and gadgets and, you know, not really paying attention. So, you know, you have to think about safety too. So the same basic conversation holds true for the heated pants. So that same jacket we're talking about should also have an output, either direct from the power feed down to the midsection area. Another little, you know, power port is going to stick out the bottom, and that's just going to pass power out to the pants. And this is where one of the zones come in. Your jacket and your gloves can be on one zone, so one heat controller circuit of some kind, and your pants and footwear should be on another. This lets you do two things. It lets you operate them independently, meaning you can turn one off or both completely off if you see your charging systems being too taxed, or if you get too warm in your midsection, you can turn that off and cool down a little bit while still keeping your feet warm while they're out there on the pegs getting cooled off. So that's a consideration. You're splitting the load and you're better able to control the distribution of the heat. The pants, again, going to take a little while to heat up. They have them available with armor built in. The review I'm going to be doing of the heated gear, the items that I selected, are going to have armor built into both. The pants that I selected are what's called hybrid. So they give you a very high output lithium battery pack. It's a brick. It looks like two of those giant cell phone chargers. I think the thing's like 5,800 milliamp hours or something. It's pretty big, and it's lithium. And there's a little pocket on the pants that this thing sits in, and you can run the pant off the battery one of two ways, either by itself on the bike, or you can use it when you get off the bike and you're walking around. The disadvantage to the to the pants that I bought is, just like the jacket has a pass-through on the end of the cuff for the gloves, the pants should have a pass-through at the end of the cuff to plug into a heated sock liner, or a heated insole. The ones I chose did not have that pass-through. So we're going to be doing some creative wiring to get the heated insoles that I selected get power to them. So be aware that that is becoming more commonplace. It used to be that the heated pants, unless they were, you know, a completely rechargeable system only, that they would have that pass-through. And for whatever reason, I don't know why people think your feet aren't going to get cold, but they're starting to emit that plug down at the pant leg cuff to power the heated sock or the heated insole. So you want to be looking for that. The pants, again, you know, the armor, are they water resistant? Are they waterproof? How do they achieve that? If the exterior isn't water resistant or waterproof, are they giving you an alternate liner to put on? Most of those things, if they're truly water impervious, they don't breathe so well, and they're going to make you sweat, and that makes you cold. So you've defeated the whole purpose. And you might not have started your ride off wearing that, and you have to pull over and put it on. Same holds true for the jacket, so something to keep in mind there. The pants will be slow to heat up, just like the jacket, and you want something that's efficient enough that, you know, you shouldn't have to have it on any of these items on full heat in order to get enough comfort out of it, unless you're in very extreme conditions. And if you're snowmobiling or snow machining in the Arctic, I'm sure there's somebody else better suited to help you with that than I. So we'll talk about the heated footwear in depth in one of the other segments, but it basically comes down to some kind of sock or some kind of insole. What I would suggest, either way you go, the sock comes up over your ankle, maybe over your calf, and the wire should come out the top of the sock and be able to connect to that cuff, or, you know, you run a wire up the pant leg as we're going to do, in order to get power down to it in the case of a pant that doesn't have the adapter. So what you want to look at in the heated insoles, the same heated insole goes inside your boot or shoe in place of their existing liner. You pull that out, you trim the heated liner fit and put it in there, and then there's a wire that comes up. One of the items to pay very close attention to is how do they get that wire out of your footwear? So imagine this is your foot. This is the instep of my foot. These are my toes, and this is the heel of my foot. If the wire comes up on the instep and comes out, you know, put your finger down the instep of your sneaker, for example. There's a bit of space there, right? You can generally get your finger in there and move around. So this wire coming up out of that area is not going to be pushing into your instep, bothering you that much. If the wire, and this is true of the socks where the wire emanates from the bottom of the sock, if this is the, let's do it this way. If this is my foot, and this is my leg coming up, this is my ankle. If the wire comes up the back of my ankle, try and put your finger down behind your heel, right? There's no room there. That wire's gonna be digging into the back of your heel. And I've seen both insoles and I've seen heated socks where, for whatever reason, they routed that wire up the back of your heel. I don't see any way that's going to be comfortable, especially if you're going to get off the bike and walk around. If you're going to a destination, a scenic overlook, you're going to a bike rally, you're going to be walking around all day. Pay very careful consideration to how that wire comes out. If the wire comes out up the instep, the analogy we were talking about before, where this is your toes, this is the instep of your foot, and it's coming up this way, I don't think that's going to be overly uncomfortable. And if you're going to be walking around enough, maybe you bring a change of footwear along with you. That's a personal preference. I probably wouldn't want to try and get in and out of that footwear, you know, and deal with the heating connections and everything, unless I'm going to be walking around for, you know, 8 hours or something. I might think about it. The next item up is probably one that everybody has top of mind when they think of heated gear, and that's heated gloves. You're probably not going to run heated gloves just themselves with no other heated gear unless you get the fully rechargeable ones. There's not a lot of real estate available to you to put a large battery on the heated glove. So they're going to be small, and smaller means less runtime. Battery technology gets better every year, and that changes. But for now, you're probably not going to get a full 8-hour riding day out of heated gloves. So why am I using 8 hours when you know in an 8-hour time you're going to have a fuel stop, you're going to have a meal stop, you're going to have a bathroom break or whatever? Because when you get off and go to lunch for an hour or whatever, you're not going to leave that heated gear turned on. It's going to cool off. You have to warm it up again. That rise to temperature to even the low setting is going to have a higher initial draw than just once it achieves temperature and is maintaining temperature. So that's going to deplete that battery versus a wired in to your bike system where you are pulling from the battery in the bike's charging system. So that's something to consider there as well. So we're going to go on the assumption that you're going to use gloves that have to be wired to the bike somehow. Most of them come with the what we call the pigtail with the 2 ring terminals to attach your battery. There's a fuse and some kind of connector on the end. It's either what's called an SAE connector, which is the little 2-prong mini trailer connector thing that you see on the end of your trickle chargers and such, for example, or it's going to be a plug that looks like a female stereo plug or something like that, and that's what most of the systems use. So if you don't have a jacket with those connectors to plug into at the cuff, you're going to have to get wires to these gloves. How are you going to do that? How are you going to have a wire coming from your right arm and your left arm and get it where it needs to go? Well, you say it's cold. I'm going to be running a jacket, and I will run the wire, inside the arm of the jacket. This is a little bit different scenario than the pants, because of, the maximum bend radius is probably 90 degrees, unless we're talking about a sport bike rider that sits, with their feet a little more rearward positioned on the pegs. This is probably a seating position where you're at 90 degrees, a little bit back or a little bit forward. Sorry, this orientation. And you're not moving around, even shifting and putting your feet down. It's not that much movement. So if you ran wires down your pant leg to get to your heated footwear, that's not going to be such a big obstacle as when you are, have your arms stretched out. You don't want anything feeling irritated there. Can you do it? Can you get by for a while? Yeah. Should not having a jacket with the connector keep you from buying heated gloves if that's really the worst thing you're dealing with right now, is your hands just get cold? If I could only keep my hands warm, I could ride another 3 hours today. No, that shouldn't keep you from buying heated gloves. But keep in mind that wiring, and how am I going to do it so it doesn't interfere with my riding and doesn't pose a safety hazard. You may be a good candidate, if this is the only consideration you have for warmth, for actually the rechargeable heated gloves. So maybe what you do is you buy a couple extra battery packs, charge them up before you leave, and you have the gloves already charged. And if they deplete, during the ride, you stop for lunch, you just swap out the other batteries. That's a possibility as well. But you have to think about all these costs inclusive, right? How much does it cost to put all that together versus getting the jacket and the gloves that are meant to tie in together? So while you are looking at jacket, pants, gloves, heated foot gear, keep in mind the draw, the amperage, and on low, medium, high. I wouldn't recommend running on high setting for any reason for any length of time at all. I don't think it's really going to make that big a difference with how quickly you feel the heat. You don't need the interior temperature to be above roughly 90 degrees, right? If you go outside on a 90 degree day, are you hot or warm? Obviously, you're trying to combat the effect of wind chill, but if you're able to keep your body temperature at 98.6, and remember, your body hasn't just shut off and said, oh, I'm going to let the heated gear do all the work. It's still trying to generate heat, right? It's still burning calories. It's still making heat. So as long as you're healthy and viable and you don't have any circulatory issues, you're not going to need any of this stuff cranked up too high. If it's quality heated gear, you should be able to ride around on a 60 or 50 degree day all day with everything set on the lowest setting possible and be completely comfortable. If the gear is not able to do that, you might want to look at, is it just a limitation of the particular model that I was looking at, or is this a consideration for the manufacturer's entire line, right? So there's a lot of detail here, and again, I deliberately didn't use visual aids because I want you to mentally think about these things, because you're going to encounter all kinds of stuff as you look online and you look on stores. And I think, you know, holding up a jacket, holding up a pair of pants at this point would just confuse you, because I'm not trying to get you to get those exact things. I'm trying to get you to think of all these things. So what's your homework? Self-evaluation. You have to figure out when you're going to use it, how you're going to use it, under what conditions you're going to use it, and what makes the most sense for you, for your budget and the amount of time you actually ride in the cold. Is it worth the investment? And for me, the answer is yes. I like riding in the fall and some nice days in the winter, and those dry spring days where it's still really cold and crisp out, you know, you get to go riding earlier as well. So it'll extend your riding season, and it'll make everything more comfortable for you. For those that ride with a passenger, just remember that you're going to be comfortable. You're up there breaking the wind for them, but they still don't have heated gear. If they don't have heated gear, you're going to hear about it, because they're still going to be cold. They're going to need something. So, you know, think about if you're going to ride in these conditions with a passenger, what it costs to get into everything there. And again, that's even more load on the system, right? Having two people draw heated gear, and you're going to have to coordinate. Basically, you're going to have to take turns and, you know, turn yours on, turn theirs off, turn theirs on, turn yours off, something like that. Or invest in a heated seat if that's all the more heat that's required. And that way you two can share. And even that's zoned. It's zoned for rider and passenger independently, most all heated seats. So you've got your homework in that regard. You have homework because you have to figure out what are the capacities of your battery, what are the capacities of your charging system, and how much load do they say it's safe to put on that system. Somebody should have that answer, either, you know, the manufacturer or a dealership, or somebody should say, hey, you can draw 10 amps all day long off this system and you'll be fine. They may say you can only draw 2 amps. This is important to know, because you're going to have to buy the most efficient gear. That if your system can only handle 2 amps, you're going to have to buy the most efficient gear. In other words, it provides you the warmth with the least amount of power draw that you can find for the money that you can afford, or you're going to have to constantly cycle through turning off and turning on different zones or different components of the heated gear in order not to overtax your system. The other thing you're going to have to do is figure out, if you're going with traditional gear where it plugs into the bike, how are you going to control those temperatures? How are you going to set those zones? And that goes back to the heat trollers. There are a lot of offerings out there. There are single heat trollers that, in the case where we said, hey, I'm only going to buy heated gloves, you just need what's called a single troller. It just controls one thing. That is kind of a false economy, because if you have any beginning of heated gear, you're probably going to get more. So I would suggest getting a dual troller. In the old days, all you could get were hardwired heat trollers, and you had, you know, some kind of like little leather pouch on your hip or something velcroed somewhere so that you could get to the dials and adjust the temperature, and you meant wires running external on you in order to control the heat. That's a bit cumbersome. That's a bit of a safety issue. There are now several manufacturers offering wireless heat trollers. So what does that mean? Everything is still there that controls the heat, but it's all inside your jacket normally, and there's a receiver. It's either RF or Bluetooth, and then the transmitter is a little block that you can Velcro or 3M double side tape, or put in a little windshield bag or a fork bag or something, and you can either turn it off or turn on the individual zones in the case of a dual troller. I would highly recommend that, just because it's less cumbersome and out of the way. It costs notably more than the single-use heat troller or single-channel heat troller, or just the hardwired ones. But again, you know, you're talking about keeping this stuff for 5 or 10 years. You're going to add on to it. Those external wires are going to get real fast, and the difference in price is going to look to be smaller. If you're cost constrained, you know, your budget just can't handle it, you can, you know, certainly use a hardwired heat troller, but take a look at how they are suggesting that you mount this thing either to yourself or to the bike, and think about how that is going to work with what you're riding and your riding style and the gear that you purchased. So I hope this gave you a good general overview of the components of heated gear, how they interconnect, and what considerations you should have in making your selection. Thanks. Ride safe. Namaste.